Hello and welcome back to the channel. I'm Justin Leopard with Concertini.com, here today with another cello lesson for you guys. Today we're going to be talking about getting the basic hand position set up and some of the basic scales that you can use to just practice. Obviously, the cello doesn't have frets, it doesn't have any sort of markers as to where your fingers go, which means that you really have to hammer in a muscle memory, which it's called, because literally your brain doesn't always think to make certain motions. Sometimes it's pre-existing electrical impulses that cause you to be able to do a certain action. So this sort of procedural memory, as it were, is actually just essential to playing this instrument because there's way too much going on to think about. And where to put your fingers is no exception to this rule. So after you've gotten your cello tuned and after you've been practicing your basic bow stroke, the next step is to know where to put your fingers down. And if you already have followed our other videos and are familiar with getting an online piano out, that's going to be the best way to know that you're on the right note. If you've tuned your cello, then we'll start on D, the second string from the top. So if you're looking at me to the right, but the thinnest string, second to thinnest string is the one we're going to start on today. And to find the first note, or rather the note of the first finger, we're going to go up one white key from D. So if you look at the piano, the group of two black keys, the white note in the middle of those, that's D. The white note to the right of that is E. So we're going to play that note in order to find where to put our first finger. There's one more note, that black key, that E flat, and that's here. So sometimes playing down here is called half position. A lot of the time you'll end up doing a finger extension to get there. We're going to get to that in other videos, but I just want to talk about first position. First position is where your first finger is a whole step above, whole step meaning that is one white key basically, because a half step would be going to one black key. This isn't always true. Sometimes the half step is two white keys, but a whole note means two half steps, and a whole note above D is where we want to put our first finger. The reason for this is it allows us to finger all the notes that occur before we hit the note that's covered by the next string. So for any keys that don't involve the half step here or the one up underneath the note of the top string, we're basically just able to put our fingers down and otherwise use open strings. So that's why it's called first position. It's the most sort of essential position for all of the keys that we're going to start out working on. And I'm going to teach you 3 keys today, all in first position, and all that you can practice to get started with just feeling where this is at. So first I want to talk a little bit about how the hand gets shaped in order to sit on the cello well. Because if that's not good, then you're not going to be able to program the muscle memory in the first place. One thing that I find is true of beginner cello students, especially when they're younger because hands are smaller, is that it can feel like, the notes are so far apart. So if you kind of just like casually open up your hand, that's going to be too narrow. So like, that's not really. So you do have to get familiar with the concept that your index finger and your pinky finger are going to get spread a little bit wide relative to what's normal. Your middle 2 fingers might actually end up staying mostly, because they're supposed to stay a little closer together. So that's the basic cello shape, is a little bit wider. You want to feel like your hand just opens up naturally other than that. So there should be space in your hand. And when we talked about the bow hold, we talked about that as well, almost like you could fit a ball in your hand. Your arm should be straight at the wrist, and your elbow should come out enough to support that. You don't want to be too in here, but you also don't want to be doing something weird that causes, just there will be a position that's natural. And the nice thing about the left hand is that for the most part, it's like the same position. You'll move your elbow up a little bit to shift, and that's it. So there's not that much like crazy motion that goes on here, thankfully. So the other thing to note about the hand position is that if you're doing it correctly, the thumb will be exactly behind the second finger on the neck. So if you put your fingers down, the second finger should come just on top of the thumb. And all of the fingers should be touching the string with its tips. So not super, super flat, not something where you're not really in control. Mostly just the tip. There's a lot of pad on the tips of your fingers, so you really don't have to ever do something like that. It can always come in from the top, and you can sometimes get more pad by going that way, but we'll talk about that more in other lessons. So to get started, open the hand comfortably, line it up so that your thumb is behind your second finger and that your elbow is supported, and then use the keyboard to find that first note. And then the other 4 notes will be going up by half steps, which means that the next note will be the following white key to the right, but then the black key above that, and then the next white note. All in all, starting on the D string, these are the notes that you're gonna get. Great. And when you just play it like that, it looks like the first 3 fingers are fairly evenly spaced, and the 4th finger goes out a little further. What's really great about using a piano to know what these notes are in the first place is that you can really just use each note as its own reference starting out and know whether you're in tune or not. One of the worst habits that you can build is consistently playing, say, the F, that's the second finger, say sharp. And to the point that you hear that as being in tune. And when you try to play actually in tune, you feel like you're playing out of tune, and then it can be like a mess. So the earliest that you can be getting it right, the easier time you'll have overall. So just start by trying to really place those fingers and lock them in. So just start by, ding, bing. And you can be practicing your détaché or long tone strokes with this. Once you get to know where they are. And then once you can do that, try to do it on the other strings. The reason why I started on D is because that is the first key that I'm going to teach you. Like I said, I'm going to teach you 3 keys today, 3 major scales that you can play. They all have the same fingering. They're all in first position, but we're going to go different lengths up them. So this is why this is going to be a great introduction, because this is going to lay the foundation of the next video when we talk about some basic repertoire you can start with. So the fingering that I'm going to teach you that's the same for all these keys is open string, first finger, third finger, 4th finger. Then you will do that on the next string as well. Open, 1, 3, 4. That's the first half of this fingering, and it's the only thing that we need to play a 1-octave D major scale. It's the same on both strings, open 1, 3, 4, open 1, 3, 4. So it goes. And always make sure to come back down your scales as well, because sometimes people neglect that, but music will come down, actually probably more than up, because people generally like downward figures a lot, so composers use that a lot. But there's different ways that you can handle this. Start by just trying to get the notes, right? But really try to do 2 things in addition. One is be really even with your timing, and the other is to be really consistent with a tone with different bowings, right? So you can do, or you can do, or you could do. That'll probably be, you probably want to build up to that. Start with just the whole note, and then you can really be practicing 2 things at once. You can be practicing your bow stroke, and you can be practicing where these fingers lie. But just getting that finger pattern down. And when you put down the 3rd finger, don't do this. Have all of the fingers below it also going down. This will give you the strongest support. And we talked about this in the vibrato video, or we will talk about this in the vibrato video, excuse me. What's cool about this finger pattern is it is the first finger pattern of the major scales that start on the open string. So those are the other 2 scales that I'm going to teach you right now. If we start this pattern on the G string, for the first octave, it's completely the same. And but then what changes is it becomes open 1, 2, 4 subsequently. And in order to get to the second octave, I'm going to teach you one other position today. I think it's a relatively easy position, probably the second, maybe even the most easy position to get to, because you actually have a physical frame of reference. It's the only one where you have a perfectly physical frame of reference, and it's fourth position. So basically, the way that the positions are named is, if first position is where you put your first finger. If you replace your first finger with where your second finger is, or third on cello, then that's second position. The reason why those are both second position has to do with violin terminology, I do believe. If you replace it with your fourth finger, that's going to be third position. And then fourth position is where your thumb will actually, this is the first one where your thumb will be behind your first finger. And that's just because your thumb is going to fall into the crook of the neck, and the first finger is going to come right on top of it. And that's why you have a physical reference for where to go. So that's why this scale will be a nice entry point to teaching shifting as you work on it. So open 1, 3, 4, open 1, 3, 4, then open 1, 2, 4, and then just shift up to fourth position. And you'll be able to get those last few notes. So this will be great because sometimes shifting gets neglected, and a lot of songs, they don't really sound as good in first position as when you can shift. So I think starting now, it shouldn't be too complicated. Let's go to the last one. The last major scale. This will help us finish out this pattern. Open 1, 3, 4, open 1, 3, 4, and then open 1, 2, 4, open 1, 2, 4. Or there's no 4, just open 1, 2. But it would be if you continued. So just for now, we'll do 2 octave C major scale. And again, it starts the same pattern, and then it changes to second finger instead of third. All right, so we're gonna go more in depth into scales, and it's really good to practice shifting really high up. Eventually, once you start getting it, especially in your ear, if you've never had major scales in your ear before. But this has been it for just teaching you how to find that first position. We're gonna include links below with the piano and everything that you'll need to be able to do this. We really appreciate you watching. Once again, I'm Justin Leopard. You can check out my playing at Justin Leopard Cello. This has been a production with Concertina.com. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.